All right, perfect. Well, all
Hi,
right.
everyone.
Well, welcome to the most exciting part of the day, which is all about funding climate robotics, because at the end of the day, it's probably one of the most important things that we need, specifically working in industries that we do, in which case there's a lot of hardware and a lot of infrastructure and a lot of regulatory stuff, as well as research, AI, R&D, you name it. And funding is critical. So with today's panel, we're going to explore the pivotal role of funding in driving innovation in climate robotics, from venture capital to government support, also former founders. Our speakers are going to discuss the opportunities, challenges, and strategies for financing cutting-edge robotic solutions that can help address climate change. Conversation is also going to touch on the emerging fields and investment trends shaping the future of climate-focused robotics. I'm Ben Maitland-Lewis. Very nice to meet you. I'm the director of startup banking at Silicon Valley Bank, but I've been a founder for over 23 years, had a couple exits, a couple failed forwards, YC alum, angel investor, and passionate about the space. So today I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues and visionaries in the industry, each with different backgrounds and focuses to share insights and learnings that they've gained while working to make our home planet more sustainable and healthier for all. So I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves and also share very briefly the role or perspective that they're bringing to this discussion, as well as maybe a core area of interest that they're tackling right now that might be keeping them up at night. So Christine, I'd love to start with you, given your experience with VoltVogel, as well as your current with DigiHub.
Thank you. So first, thank you for having me here. It's amazing to be surrounded by all those smart and driven people. I am the CEO of VoltVogel, and I'm based in Germany, in Europe. So what we did is we built robots like mobile charging stations that will drive up within car parks autonomously and charge up electronic vehicles that will be there. What I'm doing, like, I'm on the commercial part. So my co-founders, they are more on the technical part. They're robot experts and data scientists. What keeps me up all night is right now, I have not, well, unfortunately, I could not continue VoltVogel because of lack of funding in this particular area. Mm-hmm. But what keeps me up right now is an issue that I also saw when I created VoltVogel. So it was always like, how do you actually connect the cutting edge that you have, for example, in the robotic technology with the infrastructure that you have, for example, in companies, in car parks, in my field, or in logistic companies right now? And there is a huge gap. And so this brings me rather to how do you connect innovation that is actually there to the infrastructure that we see every day out there. And this, as also being based in Europe, that's made me think more and more about actually which environment are you in and how can you connect the environments that you're in wisely to actually have a strong leverage in there to fight climate change.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing, and thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Jonathan, Robocap, would love for you to share your bits as well, please. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's really interesting conference. I was reading 1 or 2 weeks ago this article from Yuval Noah Harari saying that politics don't speak enough about AI robotics, so they don't speak enough about climate change. So it's really good to work on the international cooperation on those most important topics. I'm the founder and chief investment officer of Robocap. Previously, I worked in finance. I studied finance at the University of St. Gallen. I worked at banks like Goldman Sachs, where I was portfolio manager. I was also chief investment officer in another asset manager. And I founded Robocap about 11 years ago for 3 reasons. One, passion for robotics and AI. 2, conviction that the investment case for robotics and AI was going to last to be a very strong one. On 3, the opportunity to be one of the first fund managers in robotics and AI. As you understand, Robocap is an asset manager. We are based in London, and we are focusing for almost 10 years only in robotics on AI stocks. So we take a pure play approach. We invest into companies that have a high percentage of the revenues related to AI and robotics. And we work in close collaboration with leading experts of these fields, which we see as the next industrial revolution. So what I will try to bring to the conversation is, what is the perspective of investing into stocks related to robotics regarding climate change? Examples of companies that we are analyzing, without giving too much names, are companies working on waste management. That's an example, but also space. We have a lot of satellites orbiting around the Earth. So there's a question, what do we do with this junk? Should we refuel them? Should we recycle them? There's also the whole question about how 3D printing could help in this respect, while trying to remain realistic about the capabilities of this technology. So that's what keeps me awake at night on what we focus on.
There's a lot of fascinating things to keep you up at night, that's for sure. And thank you for doing what you're doing. I had no idea that you guys were already around for over a decade, so I'm sure you have some incredible stories that you can share and some insights that we'd love to be able to share out as well. Phil, I would love to hear from your perspective from the FCDO. Hyper fascinated by that space, and would love to learn more about what you're focused on and also what's keeping you up at night.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. Hi, everyone. My name is Phil Outram. Yeah, so I've been with FCDO, was DFID. So yeah, it's the UK. It's now the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. It was the Department for International Development, which I joined about 10 years ago. So I am a climate innovation and technology advisor, and specifically I lead on our Frontier Technologies program. So this is a brilliant program I'm lucky enough to lead on that explores how new and emerging technology can particularly be used to tackle global challenges. And within that space, climate is definitely a priority. So that's mitigation, adaptation, and particularly increasing access to finance. So the program, the Frontier Tech program that I lead on, has three core parts. Firstly, a future scanning component that scans the horizon, looking to understand key trends and shifts in technology, of which obviously there are a lot. It's moving crazily fast. It's exciting, but it's hard for a big donor like the UK, and my sort of fellow donors such as GIZ, USA, etc. To keep up with all this technology. So the Frontier Technology program, a key part is to sort of horizon scan. And we've just recently done, Patrick did for us a brilliant exploration into robotics, because, essentially we're seeing technology move so fast, and we want to know what can it do for development. And robotics is such an interesting space. It's a space that, donors haven't really embraced particularly. It's not an obvious space to go. Particularly when you're thinking about development, solving global challenges. But with the introduction of AI, the speed of Gen AI, agentic AI, computer vision, etc., putting that all together, clearly robotics is in such an exciting and accelerating space. So, from a donor perspective, we want to know what that means. Is that good? Is that bad? What are the risks, etc., etc. So that's where we're at. And I guess for me, what I'm particularly interested in is disruption. I've worked in development for 10 years, and essentially development is really difficult. It's so many of the countries we work in. I've lived in Mozambique, I've lived in Sudan, I've lived in Senegal, covering Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Chad. These are pretty tough countries to do development in. The powers that be, the authority, they're not necessarily on your side, etc., etc. And the wonderful thing about tech and innovation is it can be very disruptive. So I guess from my perspective, that's what really excites me. How can these sorts of things be disruptive and work in these really hard to work places? And then from our perspective, in terms of funding, it's very much what can we do to support that?
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you. That's fascinating background. Would love to learn more about that as well. But again, you're going to bring a lot of color to this conversation. So thank you so much for sharing all of that, Phil. Really appreciate it. Fady, sorry to keep you to last, my man, but Fady's with Cybernetix Ventures, which is early stage venture fund. He's also the co-founder, I don't know if many people know this on here, of Mass Robotics, which is the first and largest robotics and AI startup escalator in the world. We're very close to them, close to my heart. So I'm excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. No, it was amazing listening to Christine, Jonathan, and Phil's background and learn more about them. Very, very well accomplished. So I'm very pleased to join today. And as Ben said, founder and managing partner of Cybernetix Ventures, we're probably first of its kind robotics focused early stage VC fund. We started back in 21 to fill the gap in early stage funding for robotics companies. And we focus on pre-seed, seed, and Series A. Geographically, we invest in North America and Europe, and vertically, we've been investing in manufacturing, logistics, healthcare, construction, agriculture, and obviously climate robotics. Today, we have 15 companies in the portfolio, and we just kind of super excited to see what has been happening in the space and the companies that has been growing. And before that, as Ben said, I co-founded Mass Robotics. We were trying to solve the infrastructure problem for robotics companies, how you fill the gap from a prototype to a finished product, which is an nascent problem in robotics that you don't have in pure software. So we created 100,000 square feet of shared office and lab space in Boston. And the idea was there is no need to replicate the infrastructure, the prototyping, machine shop, and 3D printing and all of that. Idea was to create a shared hub that early stage companies can utilize. And also building relationship with corporates, because corporates has a huge role to play in helping companies scale and grow. So probably in the course of 7 years, I spoke with maybe 300, 400 corporates from all over the world. And this gives me a front row seat in the space to understand what are the kind of market problems and where the market is pulling robotics technologies. Before that, I was at MIT, and before that, I spent 8 years in the corporate world. I used to work for Siemens and Nokia Siemens Networks, and I'm a mechanical engineer by training. So I'm very happy to join. And not many things keep me up at night. I try to have a good sleep, but the things that keep me busy is on the robotic space, how we can build and scale successful robotics companies, because it's really hard. Not many people realize that the interplay between software, hardware, integration, and testing, regulation, safety, liability, it's very complex. It's definitely much more attractive than deep tech and solving science challenges, material challenges, biotech, and all of that. But still, it has its own share of complexity. So that's why we took some initiatives in Cybernetix. We have been leading Robotics Invest, which is kind of an exclusive event attracting best founders and investors to come together and think about how to build a continuum of funding for companies. Last November, we released the Robotics Startup Playbook, which you can access through our website. Again, it's a way to help kind of share some of the knowledge we have about the last 2 decades or so of seeing companies and companies that succeeded, companies that failed. So I encourage all of you to have a look on it. So I'll stop here. I'm looking forward for the discussion.
Thanks, Fady, and thanks for all your contributions to the ecosystem. I really appreciate it. And I think the next Robotics Invest is coming up in June, if I'm not mistaken. But that's off the top of my head, so don't hold me to it. Check out the website, go from there.
June 10 to 11.
All right, perfect. Not that bad with dates then. But all right, so really appreciate all of you guys coming together for this. This is going to be a great conversation, one from deep experience from all different sides, from public sectors to private sectors, from the entrepreneurial mindset and everything else. So diving into that, why don't we dive straight into sort of the current state of investments in climate robotics. There's a lot there, and Fady actually just touched on it, with hardware, infrastructure, software, regulations, AI, and everything else. So would love to learn more about what is the current state from your perspectives, if you could share that. So let's start with Phil, because I'd love to kind of kick it off with more of the macro governmental view from the UK and beyond. What are you seeing? What are some of the trends that you've experienced and are experiencing?
Yeah, thanks. So from our perspective, I guess our job is, we've got public money to spend. So we're really looking to understand where we can use public money for public goods. So for us, that's particularly, so we've just, as I mentioned, Patrick's done a great study on what sort of, robotics looks like in the climate space. And particularly one of the things we're really interested in is things like ecosystem strengthening. We can't kind of solve the robotics problem necessarily sort of one, as a UK government supporting companies one company at a time. What we're particularly interested in is learning from the industry what the needs are to support the industry as a whole. So because ultimately, as a UK government, we're looking to see where we can really sort of see scale of solutions, because the scale of the problem is so massive. So really, I guess from our perspective, and I guess what we do resonates very much with Patrick's findings around things like funding for early stage pilots and innovation. My Frontier Technology program has about 30 pilots all running at the moment. They're not necessarily robotics pilots, but that's the sort of thing that we try and do. We try and fund the sort of most early stage ideas. And it's all about building evidence. We don't fund a pilot unless it can really generate some useful evidence that we can then share as a public good to try and, support the industry. So that's really important for us, sharing lessons. But I guess linked to that, for us, like the whole robotics is such an exciting space, but it just asks some quite significant developmental questions. So particularly around things like jobs and inequality. As I mentioned, robotics on the face of it is non-obvious space for development practitioners, but we see it as sort of too big and too important to ignore. So we're really trying to understand the pros and the cons. So we're really interested, and we have kind of research funding to put into asking those, potentially tricky questions that potentially, individual companies may, not be so incentivized to ask. But it's really important that we do as a public good. So I guess, from a sort of donor perspective, we're looking at the sort of industry in the round and trying to fill gaps and be, I guess, glue that fits other parts together, particularly where there's investment opportunities. That's great, private sector can cover that, but where are the gaps, where are the sort of the trickier bits, the bits people aren't asking, where actually research is really important to ensure we do things like no harm. And that's where donors and public money can come in.
That's right. And setting up the more formalized, sophisticated infrastructure to allow more of that private money to come in and help accelerate the go-to-market for it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So well, I was just going to say, one of the big things is things like right to repair. That came up a lot, and it's super, super important. It's such an obvious thing, but then, and the nice thing about right to repair is it's so much about more than repair. If you can repair it, you can adapt it, you can enhance it, so just those sorts of principles we're so keen to try and sort of instill and use our funding to support.
That's a really good point. That's a good point. Fady, given your extensive experience in early stage investments, pre-seed through Series A and everything else, as well as your experience with mass robotics, what are you currently seeing in the investment space for climate robotics?
Yeah, we are seeing some interesting companies. For example, the deployment of solar panels in solar farms at scale. So we started seeing. I mean, this is right now in the U.S. The bottleneck is labor. We don't have enough labor to deploy these solar panels at scale. So we started to see at least, 3-4 companies that are using mobile robots with an industrial arm on top of it to basically pick solar panels and kind of put it on a rack, and then workers will install it. So companies like Cosmic, Luminous, those are the kind of two that come to my mind. We're also seeing companies in the recycling space, trash sortation, as Jonathan kind of mentioned. So obviously AMP has been kind of the lead in the space, but also Glacier is doing some interesting work. They recently raised, I believe, a Series A. But again, how you can use robots, machine vision to quickly sort trash, and it's a big problem. So this is another use case that we have been seeing. Also, an interesting use case is demanufacturing. So thinking of all the consumer kind of electronics that we are developing, from smartphones, laptops, and then the huge data centers that we are building and all the servers that go there. What will happen when all of these equipment reach end of life? So now there's a growing trend to think of the circular economy. How can we build robots actually take these devices or equipment and demanufacture them, recycle some of the components, utilize some of the components even. And in a sense, this is what Apple, for example, do when you go and trade off your phone. They have robots that actually demanufacture old iPhones, but it's a proprietary robot. So now there are companies like Mold, for example, they are working on solving this problem, and very glad to see that they're also growing and raise another series of funding. I do believe that there is more room, for example, in wind turbines, but it's a much difficult problem to solve. Like maintaining wind turbines, as Phil mentioned, it's insane that we're building all of these kind of equipment to generate alternative energy, and then we are still asking people to be hanging from these kind of structures to maintain it and repair it. So can we use drones to do that? Can we use some sort of climbing robots? The other kind of crazy thing that I learned maybe 6 months ago from GE folks, that today the blades of the wind turbines are manufactured manually. We don't have machines to manufacture these because of the size and the complexity of the curvature. So again, like, it blew my mind that, oh my God, like why we cannot build a machine with AI that can kind of figure out how to manufacture these blades. So these are some of the use cases that we are seeing. I do believe that there's a lot of use cases. If you expand the vision to include agriculture too, as a big kind of contributor for climate change, there is more and more kind of use cases.
You mentioned a whole bunch there, and they're all hyper fascinating. I'm excited to see that Jay from Luminous is also going to be speaking as part of the summit here, which is great because I know Jay personally. His Lumi machines are amazing in what they do. Recycling also is a very important place to my heart, having grown up in Germany where Christine is. Recycling is a part of culture. Here in the US, it's broken, and they pretty much all but stopped. And so we should really figure that out. And lived for a long time in Palm Springs, California, where we have tens of thousands of wind turbines and half of them aren't moving at all. And they're probably just getting sandblasted to oblivion. So all of these areas, and then obviously agriculture as well, another thing. So, quick question before I move over to Jonathan on this to get his perspective, though, is like, do you, given your seat from the pre-seed to Series A area too, do you see these as investable areas that you guys are looking at seriously to potentially deploy capital in?
Yeah, all the companies I mentioned to you, we seriously looked at them. And I mean, right now, what I see in the space, I mean, climate as a category, I mean, sustainability, even outside of robotics, there is 4 key things that are a little bit tricky from an investment perspective. What are the right use cases to solve? What's the right valuation? Because one of the things that we have been seeing is inflated valuation because it's just climate. And obviously, this is a tricky thing because at one point, investors will be pragmatic. They will look at the revenue level and they want to see a good backup for the valuation that you are kind of demanding. So we, at least 2 companies, we had to pass because the valuation was a little bit too much compared to the revenue level. So this is another thing. We need to be realistic and not demanding a premium because it's just climate. The third thing is scaling and exit. So those 2 things, I mean, it's no secret that according to my knowledge, I don't believe that we had any successful exit in the space. So this is needed. We need to see more and more companies that scale, grow, and exit I mean, the probably the best kind of example in the space is Tesla. I mean, it's a climate company. I mean, if you think about it. But aside from that, we haven't seen really climate robotics companies that kind of grow to scale and then have a successful exit that show investors that there's a strong return on investment. So
Yeah. It's
yeah.
the long tail. It's the long tail. So we're just going to keep focusing. It's, sustainability is part of the word too. So we got to build the pipelines and have it keep going, and it'll all eventually work out. We're getting short on time, so I'm going to fly through real quick. But Jonathan, I do want you to chime in with your sort of later stage public market focus as well on the area of where the investments in climate robotics are coming from, given your perspective within investment management and having these larger funds. If you could share some of your insights, that'd be great.
Sure. Before I do, I just wanted to rebound on something that Fady said on maintaining wind turbines. And I think there will be a very interesting presentation tomorrow from Professor Mirko Kovac on this topic, on what his sustainability robotics labs at EMPA are doing. So I think that part of the answer will be tomorrow. At Robocap, so we invest into listed stocks that go from surgical robots to warehouse automation or autonomous vehicles. So we look at companies that have revenues. We don't invest into pre-revenues companies. Some do, like ARC. I'm sure that you've heard of Cathy Wood. But we only invest into companies that have revenues and a clear path towards profitability. And in my view, having a clear path towards profitability and becoming free cash flow positive, so generate cash, is very important if you want to go public. I think that too many companies have made the mistake of going public. Sometimes, I mean, recently via SPACs, just to cash in some money, and no clear strategy about profitability. But if you have a clear path towards profitability in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years, I think this is the sweet spot to go public, or it means that's 2 to 4 years before becoming break even. You should start about going public or other plans, but at least you should consider that aspect. When we analyze companies, we look at companies with a strong, attractive total addressable markets. And that very much depends on the time, on the regulation. So obviously climate is kind of a bad word to some extent in the US right now. And I'm hearing that some people are changing the name to extreme weather. Apparently extreme weather works better. But having a clear TAM is important. Having a moat, so a competitive advantage through the technology or through patents, is a very important point. On it's not always the case, unfortunately. Having a strong management to execute on a reasonable valuation. And I agree with what Fady was saying. A few years ago, we were seeing companies that were trading at an ESG premium, I would say, which doesn't resonate very well with non-ESG investors, or even we are ESG to some extent, but it needs to, the valuation needs to be reasonable. I mean, a rule of thumb is roughly a PE to growth ratio of about 1. So if your, let's say, medium-term growth rate is 20%, then 20 times 24 months forward price to earnings ratio seems generally acceptable to us on I would say, to the markets. Right now, I think that we are in the post-bubbles time when it comes to ESG. We looked at a number of companies. I mean, some have managed to go public, like Tomra, which reported results actually yesterday. They are active in the waste management, so computer vision, recycling. It's not an easy space because there's a lot of hardware and not as much software. We tend to gear our portfolio in these times more towards software than hardware, because softwares are not subject to tariffs. So for investors like us, it is an important consideration. But there are some interesting companies in waste management, I think. One aspect that we are currently working on trying to figure out is space junk. So there are a number of satellites orbiting around space, and it's not at the stage of regulation, but companies are strongly encouraged that 5 years at maximum after the life of the satellite that they deal with the issue. That can be to destroy the satellite, which creates some issues for the climate, or it could be refueling the satellites to increase the life of it. But you can imagine that the challenges. Both solutions exist, and we are trying to figure out which one is going to win. But we looked at, for example, the Japanese company Astroscale, which is looking at both solutions. If they come to an economically viable and technologically viable solution, a lot of companies will be interested, not just because they are pressured by the government, but you have to, otherwise it becomes space becomes a problem. Another aspect regarding energy consumption is the efficiency of AI on data centers. So it is a very important point. So we have seen recently with innovation from DeepSeek R1, for example, how a model can reach the same level as other models that were prevailing with, let's say, 10 to 30 times less energy. So that's a really interesting breakthrough. And all our experts in our advisory board are telling us that the way we are coding the models is not optimal. There are significant improvements that can happen. So that's interesting. There are significant improvements also on the chips. As you may know, an AI chip from NVIDIA today is about 1,000 times more efficient than 5 years ago, and 1 million times more efficient than 10 years ago when we started to invest into NVIDIA. So that's mind-blowing. I mean, right now in AI chips, the main bottleneck when it comes to energy consumption is not the chip itself, it's the networking. It's moving the data from one point to the other of the data center. There's a lot of work on what is called silicon photonics. So making sure that this communication is not done via copper on the electric cables, but done via fiber optics, which is a lot more efficient. That is about 2/3 of the energy of the AI data centers right now. It's the networking, moving data from one point to another, not the calculation itself, which is happening in the chips. So I'm quite optimistic that there's room for energy efficiency that will be translated into a greater return on investments.
Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate that. That's very fascinating insights there. Invite anybody to drop some questions in the Q&A. Fady actually already responded to one, which was great because we're running up on time. We've about 4 or so minutes left. So I want to bump into the next conversation here, which is really around the challenges that we're seeing. And if you have any successes that you want to share as well, please do, because we all love optimism. But let's talk about some of the challenges. And Christine, I want to start with you because of your experience as a founder, having some trouble securing funding and everything else. Where do you think the gaps were? What challenges did you face in securing funding for your company?
So I think what we did at VoltVogel, we tried to, let's say, not rebuild the infrastructure for fueling up car that we used to have before, so not the gas stations. But we said, okay, so let's take the advantage of the distributed energy that we have, and let's have the people benefit from it. How can you do this? Well, by actually bringing the charging station to the car instead of the car going to the charging station. So the idea was pretty simple. We based it on huge part of the robotics that were already at market, and we, let's say, screwed it together in a different way to really serve for our purpose. And we were acting as virtual power plants because we could actually store the energy in our batteries. Now, the problem besides is you're somehow between the space of, let's say, industrial robots that people will know and energy. So energy storage system, BESS, whatever, that people will know. But having one investor that is, for example, really fond in energy investments, then explaining him the robotics side is tough. The same as the other way around. They will always ask you, like, where are the 50 IPs you have on it? And you're just we're commercializing a lot of it, right? So what I thought was really interesting, we found from the customers, we found actually a huge need of it. So once you move out of this, let's say, caged area of industrial robots, you have a lot of, let's say, commercial robots, that start interacting with humans, or that start, let's say, to share the space that humans also need. And I think this gives a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of it is also scary. So we had, like, for example, in our risk matrix, like, how do people actually interact with it? And that was like one of the first things that investors used to ask is, well, what if somebody steals it? So there's like a lot of other questions to raising from it when you go out of the lab space and try to commercialize on it. Now, I think this is also actually a huge potential to tap into, because if you don't say, well, we're just automizing something, but we're building something new due to the help and the support of robots, of climate robots, I think you can create more, but you have to have, well, I think the best would be like a good combination of two, for example, two co-leads in the investment space, that one has their focus on both, and then they could say they're joining forces on that.
100%. That makes sense. We see that quite a bit these days as well, especially within the space, because a lot of it is hardware or energy or software, and it's just a different go-to-market, different expertise. Doesn't take a lot of ink to write a check, and so it's like a whole thing that you're really kind of trying to match make those areas. Kind of speed round here because we are at time, but I would like to hear, I mean, if any of you guys want to share on the panel any challenges that you're seeing in the space, or particularly any successes to leave us with, please do share. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll quickly come in. I guess, I mean, just sort of speaking to the community, I mean, one of the challenges we have, it's pretty new for us. Robotics, I guess, has a stigma, and that is a challenge. A lot of the countries I've lived in, unemployment is a massive problem, and often robotics synonymous with doing manual work, etc., etc. So I guess for us, there's a real need to really understand the development value and how the development value outweighs the development risks and challenges, and that speaks to equality and inclusion, and not sort of damage. And I guess, and then linked to that, one of the things I guess the others will be interested in is it has to be scalable, it has to be commercially sustainable and scalable. So it's those sort of combinations. We would love to hear more about robotics that does sort of touch those key points, which will help us build the case to then support the robotics space more fully. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Phil.
I might comment on the stigma around robotics, and obviously having been in the space for some time now, it is true that there has been a stigma around robotics, especially from a public kind of perception and government perception, and even for politicians to get reelected, you want to stay away from robotics because it's perceived as taking away jobs. So we have seen all of that, but I think many of that is changing now, because right now we have labor shortage in a lot of verticals, and as I mentioned, like in solar panels, for example, we don't have enough people to do that. So there's a need to use robots, even in places like manufacturing and warehouses. The turnover is pretty high, and companies struggle to find workers and to retain them. It's just kind of too expensive and very hard to keep folks. So there's a role for robotics to play, and there's a need. But the interesting thing is, once you deploy robots to do the things that we don't have people to do it, or we don't have people that like to do it, then you are actually generating much more economical value that open up more jobs, maybe different
right.
kind of jobs, but it
Mhm.
open other jobs, because right now you are building successful businesses. But if you are a warehouses or e-commerce business or a manufacturing business, and you get stuck because you don't have the labor or you have a high turnover, guess what will happen after a few years? You will be out of business. And even the jobs that you have, you wouldn't be able to pay for it. So we need to, all of us, we need to kind of take this larger picture that it's not there's this association, and this is the tricky thing about humanoids is once you create a machine that looks like a human, now this kind of humanoid will replace my job. And this is a tricky kind of image. But I think we should all think of robots as tools, as
Yep.
things that augment human capability. And we need robots in order to expand the economy, in order to solve some of the pressing problems like climate. I mean, there is no way that we can solve the climate problem without the use of automation and smart machines, because simply we can come up with the technology like solar panel, but then when you want to deploy at scale, how would you do it? Manually,
Mhm.
there is no way that you can do that. The same for wind turbines, the same for recycling. So even though that we might find the technology, the solution, the deployment, the maintenance, the sustainability of these systems, there is no way that it can be done at scale without smart machines. So I think we all need to embrace that, and we shouldn't be shy to kind of share that, because there is a public perception that we all need to change.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. With every new introduction of technology, new jobs that we never once imagined appear. It always happens, and it's really just about continuing to communicate and shedding fear of people's doomsday images of Terminator 2 and anything else that they have going on in their brain. It's not going to it's not going to be like that at all. And in fact, it's going to have massive benefits for us, humanity, and the Earth. So listen, we are at time, so I just really appreciate all of you guys joining for today. This has been fascinating. I think this is a topic that we could honestly talk about, at least with your professional backgrounds and tenure and everything else. We could do a masterclass on this all day. So Patrick, next time book us for 3 hours. We'll make it happen. But for now, thank you all very much for all your contributions. And if anyone out there listening wants to learn more of how to tackle this or whatever, please feel free to reach out to us. I'm volunteering that for you guys on the call, because at the end of the day, we're here to support you. We want to support, and you're not alone, building in your silo. And a lot of what happens when you're talking and I'm listening to these individuals speaking is I'm listening to how they are speaking about these topics. And that in itself helps me figure out also how to best communicate to different individuals. And so please do reach out, continue building, stay positive, and thank you.